Hello buddies, in this video I will show you my Vanguard DPS build that I use all the time in hardcore Star. So this is a kind of a high DPS build and I will show you how it's done. And just a little disclaimer, I started tank pretty recently after when they changed the stat. I just didn't switch tank right away. I waited a couple of months because I was not really satisfied with the tank's DPS, but after experiencing stuff, I'm pretty happy to do a video about my new tank. And just a disclaimer, tank is pretty easy to build. You don't there's not just one build. You can build the way you want. Like you can be a bit squishier, it's fine as long as you don't die. That's the only important thing. Like if you don't die, you can build anything. And the major problem for most people is aggro, so I will show you how I maintain aggro, but most of the time your build doesn't matter. So if you see something on my build that you're like, I don't like it, I think it's not really good, you can just switch it out to just match your own playstyle. I just use that myself because I just like the way it feels and it's my own build. So you can also write in the comment section if you think something is not really good. I can take advices, but that's how I like to play. So let's start. Just for the consumables, I play with Caprice, Full Hammer, Favor Elixir, for the deflection, of course, and the Caprice for the hit points and the deflection. You can play with the most recent Caprice, not the Legacy Caprice. It's pretty much the same thing, just the deflect is a bit different. Yeah, the Elixir. And the Superior Flask of Potency just for a bit more damage. I don't think there's anything else good for tanks to play in this slot, so I just use that because it's really good. I play with Chocolate for the awareness or the Seared Tuna for more crit strike. Just depends what I feel. But you can use any kind of guild food. Invocation Blessing, of course. So those are the potions. And I use 2 horns, 1 Hellstone here. So I showed that. And now for the build. I use a Turban of Shift and Sand. It's the new hardcore piece that you get in Vault of Star Hardcore. This piece is amazing. I mean, just use it for anything, because when you use a daily power, which you use a lot on fighter, it just attracts everything, and it makes it so much easier for the DPS, especially on the Lumi phase where you just kill everything in 2 seconds. So just play with that, you will not regret it. For the chest, I just play with that for awareness basically. And my modification, as I said earlier, you can play with anything. I just play with power because I like to do a bit more damage, but if you want to be a bit more tankier, you can play with more hit points. It's really free. You can build anything. Compared to the DPS build where you need to really have the perfect, almost the same build as me if you want to optimize your damage. On tank, you don't have to. You can build anything, and as long as you don't die and as long as you keep aggro, everything is fine. There's no competition on this. And for the enchantment, tactical, negation, you can play with Elven Battle if you want, or Eclipse. I think I never really tried it, so that's it. Oh yeah, for the helmet, I forgot this Overload. You can play with hit points, but or you can play with none. It doesn't really matter, but I just use that because I have it. And for the gloves, the Grag Scalar Gauntlets, it gives you power and awareness, and you lose some movement speed, so it's not really noticeable, the movement speed that you lose. Especially in Mod 21, you will gain a bunch more movement speed with the Azors and utility slots. So I use that to have a kind of permanent power and awareness when I fight mobs, because this is a mob loadout. And I also use it for boss fights, don't worry. So again, Overload for 5% physical damage reduction. And I play with Masterwork. Masterwork is the best of the weapons that you can choose from. And the modification, I use Cleave because I will show you, but in my build I use Cleave is the one that deals the most damage on at-wills. I use Lightning because more you can touch multiple enemies, so It helps keeping aggro on multiple mobs. Tenebrous, it's always good to have for a bit more damage. Assassins, you can play with anything, as I said. It's just there because I use them in my offensive loadout, so it's just there. And for the shield, I use a recharge speed and power. Like, as I said, you can use anything, but that's my build. And Azores and Assassin. For the boots, it's the new boots that boost your critical avoidance and your power. I use that because of the power. It gives me a bunch of power so I can do a bit more damage. And Forte and power for the modification and the enchantment. On mobs, I use the Envenom to get my daily faster in order to proc more my turban. But you can play with the Frozen. I was playing with Frozen for a while. And also the Wyvern knives, because I use the Wyvern set, which is there, Wyvern set. I use a Dark and an Assassin, and Combat Advantage. You can also use the Apocalypse set. It's a good set for tanks. It's just that I prefer Wyvern because it has higher item level and I really like item level. And also you can like put it at the DPS feat pretty like strategically, like on big DPS phases, like on bosses. So you just use a daily, it drops the circle and it gives your allies like 5% outgoing damage, 5% power and 5% critical severity. So if they didn't cap their power or critical severity like at the moment that they activate their big powers, it can give them the caps that they need to do more damage. And for the rings, did I say yeah, use combat advantage. You can use awareness, it doesn't really matter. For the ring, it's like the old Manticore ring. You just, when you use a daily, you reflect damage equal to 50%. This ring is a bit less powerful than it was before because now the hit that they take, that is equal to 50% of your hit points, gets deflected. So if you don't have a lot of deflection, this hit will be really reduced. And it gives awareness, and I use the awareness modification kit. And for the offensive and offensive, I use assassins. And I use the new Ring of Air because it gives a bunch more power, damage, so I just use that because I like to do damage. It's a DPS AOE build. And of course the other Wyvern belt, combat advantage, forte and defense, pretty standard. And I got lucky and I got the shirt and the new pants in the hardcore Vault of Star. But you can play with the old ones, the 1300 ones. They basically do the same, it's just that they are a little bit higher item level just to show off a little bit. So assassin and tactical here for the other one, for the pants. So yeah, I showed that. Yeah, my stats here, I just use strength and constitution. Strength for a bit more stamina regen and physical damage boost, and constitution for hit points and action point gain. So yeah, for I showed everything. Yeah, so those are my stats. I'm not sure if I have still the 2 minutes. Yeah, so I will just bracket that really quick for the video. So yeah, I have 54% power, and you see those percentages, they're pretty high for tanks. And my awareness is a bit low because I'm alone in here, so my chest doesn't proc. So those are my stats. I think they are pretty good. It makes me survive. It makes me do a bunch of damage in Vault of Stars, so I think that's pretty good. For the powers, I use Threatening Rush to close the gap within enemies, so it's a bit easier to aggro everything on mobs, because sometimes the mobs can be really spread out, so I just use that to close the gap and just take them one by one. And I use Cleave because if I use Bull Charge, I have a feat that boosts my Cleaving Bull. It boosts the at-will damage by 40 magnitude, so what I do is I use Bull Charge and I try to hit multiple targets with Cleave so I can do more damage. And I also use Enforced Threat because I don't know how many hit points, it gives 10% damage, awareness reduction on the targets. So that's the first thing that is really good. Second thing is it's a hard taunt, so that's the second good thing. And the third one is that if you hit multiple enemies with this, it gives you more AP. I don't know exactly what's the amount of AP that it gives, But like if you hit like 5 or 6 enemies, you see your action points just jump all of a sudden. It's like it gives 25 action point back every enemy you hit with that. I think it has a cap, and 25 is just me, like I don't really know, but it's a pretty good chunk of AP that it gives back. And daily I always use Bladed Rampart first to cap my defense and my awareness, because they are not capped, and I don't think you need to get them capped on mobs or even on bosses. So I use that to do a bit more damage and to cap my defensive stats, so I'm a bit more tankier. And it works well with the Turban. I just get all the enemy close to me and they start attacking me, so it reflects them damage. I really never use the second one. And for the class feature, I use Greater Endurance for a bit more movement speed, because there can be some people that really like to rush into enemies. I use that to be a bit quicker. And Vigorous Strike to get a bit more offensive stats. For the feats, I use a Shield Thrower here, but I mean, it doesn't really matter which one you use, because I don't use a Shield Thrower in here, but you can use a Staying Power if you want to get a bit more aggro with your at-wills, but it's not really game-changing. You can play with, you don't have to play with that. And Cleaving Bull is necessary with Bull Charge on mobs. Combat Balance, because it gives a like kind of close of 10% damage reduction. Sharpened Sense, because it gives 30% more awareness when you use your daily that you always use. And Shake It Off, because it's like a 600 magnitude hit when your stamina is full. Like their normal one is 300. It's 800. I thought it was 600. Yeah, it's a 800 magnitude every 10 seconds. So that does a lot of damage. And for the boons, pretty standard. Like almost everything in defense. I use a bunch of offensive stats too, but it doesn't really matter. Lingering Medicine is pretty important, because there's the trick that healers play with a potion. When they use potion, there is a guild boon that just heal allies, and it can proc your own Lingering Medicine, which is really powerful. So those are the boons. You can screenshot them. That's what I use. For the guild stronghold, I use Critical Strike, because I just want more Critical Strike. It doesn't really matter. I use Awareness, the potion. When I use a potion, I heal others too. And this doesn't matter. For the companion, I use a Zuna. So this is a Zuna build, basically. I use everything that boosts Zuna's damage, but sadly, as a tank, you cannot really cap all of your offensive stats, and Zuna works better if you have higher offensive stats. So my Zuna is not really optimized like a DPS Zuna. So keep that in mind, it's not as strong as a DPS Zuna. Like a Zuna from a real DPS, I mean. And for the companion gear, I don't play with any kind of defense gear. I just play with a bunch of gear that gives like double offensive slots, and that are 1300. It doesn't matter which kind that you have. You just get some offensive stats, and Indomitables in all of the slots, because it's a Zuna build. And for the enhancement, you want power, because you like power a lot, because you're a tank, so you use every kind of power that you get. And for the companions, I use all 5 companions of the hull. I use this one like Cathy's Coordinate, because it gives movement speed, and you kind of want movement speed, and it also boosts all of the other ones. So Brunar for defense awareness, Wolfgar for combat advantage accuracy, Rigus for deflex chance and deflex severity, Dritz for critical chance and critical severity. So all of those one I use. For the mount, I use a bit more power, because I need power, and Vortex, just to get the mobs closer to each other. But you can use like any kind, like Eclipse Lion if you want. You can use the line that gives hit points. It doesn't really matter. Even like for me, it doesn't really do much, this Vortex, since my group just kills mob in 1 second, so it never have time to attract all of them. And for the mount bonuses, Play with Magistrate Patience, because when I receive a critical strike, I just boost my allies, so that's kind of good. 2 Warlords Inspiration, Survivor's Blessing, and Gladiator's Guild to move a bit faster. And the insignias that you equip doesn't really matter. Personally, I kind of use all offensive ones, and especially with the mythic insignias that they will release, you kind of only want one set of mythic insignias, right? So I will just have one set of offensive insignias because I need them for my DPS build, and so you don't really need like defense insignias and all of them. So for the colors, I have mythic colors, but you really don't need them, just because I like item level and I like to be min-maxing. So encounter powers, critical severity, movement speed, stamina gain, and astral diamond. But you don't need them really. So that's my build. Show you my single target one now. It's this one. So basically I don't really change much, so it will be pretty short. I just switch the envenom with the knives, so I can use knives. I just switch the carpet for the Eclipse Lion, and I think something like I think yeah, it's just the same, but the insignias are a bit different, but I think it's just because I made a mistake there. Use a feral raptor in case that the other people has it, but you can use anything that you want. I use a deep crow because I want a bit more awareness on bosses, just to be a bit tankier, because the bosses can hurt a little bit more than mobs, so that's why I'm using that. And you don't need movement speed, where like there was Cathy's power with movement speed before. You don't need movement speed on bosses, so that's why I switch it out. And for the powers, I think that's the part that changed the most. On bosses, I always use Threatening Rush basically, and I use Bracing Slash to just regen my stamina basically. And also yeah, I use Shield Throw and First Threat and Knight's Valor, so that's kind of different from my AOE build. But I will show you a clip like how to activate them to keep aggro, because that's the part that most people struggle keeping aggro. And all the rest are kind of the same. Combat superiority to get more aggro instead of movement speed, of course. And the powers are the same, I think. So yeah, and did I miss anything? Those are my stats. So I will show you some clips how to keep aggro on bosses. I don't think anyone needs help keeping aggro on mobs. I mean, it's just a matter of how fast your DPSs are and how fast you can use Threatening Rush, right? But I think most people struggle on bosses, so I will show you a clip on how that works, and I will also show you leaderboards of this build doing damage. So just in reference, I do 60 million damage with the group I run with, and it's a really strong group, so that's pretty good for a tank, I think. And yeah, I think everything is covered, and I play human, so I hope you like this video. If you liked it, you can press like, and if you haven't subscribed already, you can subscribe. I always love seeing people subscribe to my channel. If you have questions, you can just write them in the comment section and I will answer them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So bye bye buddies. When you enter the first boss, I proc my Knight's Valor right away. Use my shield throw, I dash with Threatening Rush, I position just behind the boss and use everything. I also use my daily, and after that I just like use whatever. And the last is just retaliate, because I know that when the poison spawns, then I can just retaliate the damage and do more threat before it disappears.
Oh, sorry, I was there.
de mes capacités que j'active. À place de mourir, ça draine mes manas. Ah, c'est ça! Attends, je vais. Attends, peut-être pas. Ça lève les là.
Oh, not you with my
Je
knives
comprends
on
pourquoi
me.
je draine mes manas.
But you?
I got your help.
Are you using?
Condition MP égale à 25% des dommages que je reçois.
There we go.
I was a few seconds
J'ai-
behind you guys,
Fait qu'à
sorry.
partir de prendre des dégâts, ça consomme
Oh
mes
no.
manas.
Damage all the time?
C'est pour ça, des fois, je suis
Spread
comme
the
bro,
files
ça va
on
pas
it.
mes manas, c'est ça, parce que j'ai activé cette capacité-là. Mais je peux survivre, mais c'est juste que j'ai The second boss, I enter, I press my Night Valor right away, shield throw, threatening rush, and now I just continue with some retaliate in the middle, so I can reflect a bunch of damage, and I just spam cancel threatening rush, and now we just pop everything, and now same thing, I just shield throw, I do all the encounters, I don't even care, like, watching their meter, because I know they won't, they never steal my aggro anyway, so I don't use threatening rush for heart hunt, so just spam threatening rush all the time,
I went in too early. I feel like that.
and I try to just dodge all the red
Yeah, I was looking
as
at it.
possible, because even if you're a tank, doesn't mean you have to tank everything. And sometimes when my stamina is too low, I just use my other at will,
Yep, yep.
Bracing Slash, to just regen.
You did. I used.
Now we're just gonna use our mount power. And the boss is dead.
Dude.